Now this is no ordinary chocolate cake recipe. This is my total local chocolate cake recipe. Now not to say that there is a chocolate cake recipe that only using local ingredients. The total local part of the title refers to the actual chocolate I'll be using as the star ingredient in this recipe. Now our local chocolate comes from the Trinitario bean, and the Trinitario bean is a hybrid of the Criollo and the Forastero beans and was created right here in Trinidad and Tobago. It is also one of the finest beans in the cocoa world or the chocolate world. So you see where I'm going with this. To make the best chocolate cake, we have to use the best ingredients. So I'll also be using some cocoa powder that I got from Jillian from Sunita's Organics. Sunita's Organics is just but one of the many chocolatiers who are making fine cocoa products in Trinidad and Tobago and embracing the whole farm to bar or bean to bar process in chocolate making. And this means that they could participate in more ethical and sustainable practices within the industry. And Jillian is also an activist and change maker and the co-founder and co-director of ARC, which is the Alliance of Rural Communities. And Jillian herself has a secret recipe for a total local chocolate cake, and that is totally local, 100% local products, and I hope to get her to share that recipe with me in the future.
So this is a chocolate cassava. It's a flourless chocolate cake, but it's kind of a brownie, so you can change the proportions depending on how dense you want it. And so this doesn't, you can be stranded in Trinidad with a complete restriction on bringing in things. And here we will be drinking pina coladas and eating chocolate cassava flourless cake.
The Sunita's Organics cocoa powder is an all-natural cocoa powder that they press to remove the fat content, and it is not alkalized. The alkalized cocoa powder is more like the foreign brands that you would get in the supermarket, and those would tend to be darker in color. But as you can see here, this one is a little more brownish reddish in color. I'll also be using cocoa ball in my buttercream frosting. Now this is the same cocoa ball that my mother and grandmother used to grate to make cocoa tea for us when I was growing up. And they could still get these in the market, and they already come with a lot of spices in them like nutmeg and cinnamon. And to top off the cake with a little texture and add some raw cocoa flavor to balance off some of the sweetness of the frosting, I'll be using some cocoa nibs. And the cocoa nibs actually have a lot of health benefits as well, so we're good to go here. To begin the cake, we're using 2 cups of all-purpose flour, and I'm also sifting in some salt, baking powder, and baking soda into the dry ingredients. And don't worry, a link to the full recipe with all the measurements will be posted in the video description. Add in the Sunita's cocoa powder and some coffee. Also adding in some brown sugar, but you could use white sugar here if you want. It's optional. And the only spice I'm using in the cake is tonka bean. Now, I love the flavor that tonka bean adds to dark chocolate, so you're going for that kind of dark chocolate flavor profile here with the Sunita's cocoa tonka bean and a little bit of coffee. Add that nice rich robust flavor. So there's not no basic chocolate cake we're making here. It's refined business we're dealing with. Make sure the dry ingredients are well combined, and then you want to set aside. Starting off with eggs for the wet ingredients, and you could use a whisk or a fork to beat them lightly. You want to add a cup of milk, and here you could use almond milk or coconut milk here if you want, if you're lactose intolerant. Now add in some oil here as well, and I'm using vegetable oil, but you could use coconut oil, you could use soybean oil, or you could use butter as well. Add the beaten eggs. Now you want to combine all this. And the last ingredient we want to add to our cake batter is some boiling water. I'm going to add that in and combine. And boom, as easy as that, cake batter done. The only thing left to do is to grease our 9-inch cake pans. And even though these are non-stick, I don't trust them at all. So I'm greasing them. I could use oil or butter here. Then I want to line the base with some parchment paper or wax paper. Now you want to divide the batter into 2 and bake 2 separate cakes. Now if you want, you could use a deeper cake pan if you're not bothering to do all the layering and frosting. If you want to, just a naked chocolate cake, that's fine too. You don't have to dress this up. This is a recipe that could stand on its own. You want to place the cakes in a preheated oven at 350 degrees and bake for 30 minutes. And once the cakes are done, you want to leave them to cool for 10 minutes in the pan, then remove them from the pan and allow them to cool for at least 30 minutes. And while the cakes are cooling, let's work on the cocoa tea buttercream frosting. So as I mentioned before, we're using the long time cocoa ball that your grandmother used to make tea with, and these are already full with flavor as they often have other spices mixed in with them. You want to use a box grater and turn it into a powder. Now you want to add 1.5 cups of room temperature butter to a bowl, sift in the cocoa powder from the grated cocoa ball, and make sure to save the bits that didn't pass through the sieve. You want to use them later to top the cake. No wastage. Add a few cups of ice and sugar. Then you want to use a spoon or a spatula to combine the ingredients well before we start to cream it. Add 2 tablespoons of milk, and then you want to use a hand beater or stand mixer, and you want to cream the butter and sugar and cocoa powder together. And this should take about 3 minutes give or take to come together. We're looking for a light and airy frosting. Be careful not to overbeat it, else it will start to separate, and we don't want that. And boom, there is it there. Now to assemble the cake. You want to cut off the top of the cake and make it flat. Now mine wasn't perfectly flat, so don't worry if yours isn't either. We just need it flat enough so the top cake could rest on it without us having to worry about it toppling over. And of course, you're not going to throw away the pieces you cut off. That is to munch on in the meantime. And just check to make sure that the cakes could stack without leaning or being lopsided. Now you want to add a decent serving of the frosting to the bottom layer, and try to make sure that the entire surface area has enough coverage. You want to spread that over, then gently rest the other cake on top, and you want to slather that with a decent helping of the frosting. Make sure you get good coverage on top as well. Now I just take what was remaining of the frosting and I tried my best to make sure that the sides look as decent as possible. Now it's not as luxurious as some other cakes I've seen on the internet, but it's about quality and not quantity, so fear not, we good here. And last but not least, you want to top off the cake with a healthy serving of the cocoa nibs, and then finish it off with a sprinkling of the remaining cocoa powder from the grated cocoa ball. And all yeah, that is it right there, you know. My total local chocolate cake. Boom. And after a million pictures, I finally going in for a slice. And I'm pretending to take a big healthy slice here like I'm gonna eat all this, but the truth is, I am not. I really wanted to do something that focused on showcasing our local cocoa and chocolate. So I think, you know, with the cocoa powder that you could get from Sanita's Organics, the cocoa ball that you could get from the market, and the cocoa nibs which I got from Market Movers, it really showcases the different products that you could get from our local cocoa, our local Trinitario bean. And I'm finally going in for a proper taste. The cake itself is moist, and the buttercream frosting is a nice complement to the rich flavor of the cake, but it isn't overly sweet. And some frosting like to use sugar for flavor, but this is not what we have here. The rich cocoa flavor is coming through and it have just the right amount of sweetness. And all in all, for a first time making anything like this, I have to say that it didn't turn out bad at all. If you like this recipe, please give the video a thumbs up and give it a share. And if you didn't like this recipe, please give the video a thumbs up and give it a share. And if you do try it, please be sure to post your photos to Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and tag us. And also tag the local chocolatiers whose chocolates you may have used to make your cake. As always, the full recipe can be found on eatahfoodtt.com. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.